So welcome to Pax Europiana here in front of my new Kosovo flag. I'm very happy about that one. And I would like to welcome you, and I will now explain why we need 1.5 trillion new European debt taken in the same instrument as we have done it in the Corona COVID, this 750 billion common European debt instrument, and we need the same. And this time it must be focused on Eastern European infrastructure, on Eastern European security, because obviously the situation is we have a crisis, a war in Ukraine, Russian aggression, we have to act, and this is a major crisis, and the answer is also financially. Of course, militarily, we need to supply Ukraine, but it needs all money. Ultimately, all boils down to money. The Americans have reinstated the Land-Lease Act. We don't have the same instrument. What we have is the answer is this debt instrument on the European level. And it's much fairer because we have various aspects of this crisis are hitting various EU member countries differently. And we need to share these costs, and we also need to put them on the time axis ahead, because to carry the cost of energy transition immediately is of course highly inflationary, and that's of course a problem. We need to soften the blows and share the costs over time and over all Europeans together. So a new debt instrument of 1.5 trillion is the right thing to do. What we need to package in that one? I have put 10 issues. It's quite logically. That's of course the defense of Ukraine, the costs of the war. This is very important, and of course they need to be shared. It's not the Estonians give this, the Germans that. Yeah. No, we need to package it, and the cost of the war must be packaged and must be carried together in one common debt instrument. Yeah. That is for the victory of Ukraine, for the armament of Ukraine, and that's very important. Obviously also the financial costs of keeping the Ukrainian state functioning. Mrs. von der Leyen in her speech yesterday, she said it very clearly. There is this necessity of the estimation of the IMF, $5 billion every month cost the Ukrainian state to keep it running. And then that's of course a big issue. So how to pay that? Of course the international financial institutions, but we need a common debt instrument to participate in that cost as well. So keeping the Ukrainian state running, and also to the transition of the euro. I always mention that because Ukraine needs the euro very urgently, because now under martial law the exchange rate is frozen in the hryvnia, 29 to the dollar, but it needs to be permanently fixed to the euro, and in fact it's much better to introduce the euro the same we have done it in Montenegro and Kosovo. That's the first 2 points, the most important, the victory militarily, the funding and arming of Ukraine, and of course the Ukraine state to be stable financially, and the transition to the euro. Then what is very important is the energy transaction. That's very important. We need to leave Russian energy behind, and for that we need to also, because countries are differently affected, Slovakia, Hungary, Germany, Austria, gas, oil, and so on and so on. There's all these aspects. So we need to fund that together in a generous big package. That's the energy decoupling from Russia. That's the embargo costs, and they need to be shared together much better than to have these price effects. And we need also to nationalize the Russian assets. Obviously, we need in the European Union the Russian energy assets. We need to build European energy companies owned by the EIB, which I said so often already. And this is all very costly, so that needs to be Europeanized. Also the green transition in Europe. So this new infrastructure for import, the necessity to build new infrastructure, but also to build new generation capacities in the green transition. That's all very expensive, so we need to fund that together. Then also the cost of the refugee crisis. Some countries have a lot, like Poland, some less, like Portugal or Ireland. Yeah? Let's be first of all open, include everybody long-term in the labor market. Don't send them back, let them stay here, not 1 year only working permit, but permanently. Let please this be a serious effort of openness, and build a trans-European, pan-European labor market, including Ukraine and the Balkans. And then the cost of reconstruction. Already the cost of reconstruction have reached several hundreds billions, Mrs. Ursula von der Leyen said. Yeah, you know how it's concretely the estimations are running into half a trillion. Yeah, so it's really huge the damages, and that Russia will pay something of that. I don't think so. So I don't think at all. So we will have to pay it, and we have to calculate it, and we have to Europeanize it. The costs of integration of Ukraine in the European Union by 2029, that's of course also expensive. There was already before the war the estimation that the whole of the Ukrainian infrastructure costs to develop at European level will be about 277, was the Zelensky number when he went to Washington in September 2021. So we have the cost of reconstruction, the cost of EU integration. Okay, that's alone for Ukraine 700, I would calculate, estimate. Nobody can know for sure. 700 billion, alone the Ukraine section. But then we have also the 6 Western Balkan countries, the peace in between Kosovo and Serbia, which will certainly cost something, because that's the way peace is made. Yeah, you have to pay something for it. Of course, the euro, that's I will mention in the next one, but this will cost something. And also for Georgia and Moldova, it's much smaller countries, but it's quite easily to be calculated that alone this will cost. There was no war destruction, so let's not exaggerate the cost of that one, but it will be significant as well, and it has to be added in one big package. And then, of course, the euro for all the countries, because most of them, they have already a euro pack, but it's much better to have the euro directly. It's of course an attractive offer for Serbia to have the euro, and it's also very good for Ukraine now, but also then to immediately do it for Albania, Macedonia, Bosnia, and for Georgia and Moldova. It's much better to do it in one big sweeping now decision. Everybody can have the euro, and then we have no currency risk. And of course it's also deflationary, because much more assets, much more people, much more land in the European currency area is definitely contributing to less inflation. That's very important in that aspect as well. And then the cost of European nuclear rearmament. We need also to extend the the French nuclear protection towards all of Europe. We need to participate in the French cost, but we also need a common European defense project. And it's not reasonable to do 100 billion by the Germans and that's it. No, it's also not enough to do 2%. That's of course necessary. I actually think we should increase that in the light of what happened now with the war in Ukraine, the second phase, the 2022 escalation. But because the 2% were the answer for 2014, we probably have to go for 3%. Yeah? And then we need also these costs to be Europeanized, what is now happening, especially the extension of the French nuclear umbrella towards all Europe, and also the conventional rearmament of Europe. It must also in the big ticket items, especially aircraft carriers and the big air defense projects and the infrastructure attached to it, needs to be Europeanized. And that is the 10-point items. 1.5 is an estimation. I basically said the crisis is much bigger than COVID, so basically we need the double of the resources, and we need this time to extend it also to the Balkans, to Ukraine, and we have the effect of the Ukraine war and the reconstruction of Ukraine, so I think it's quite a good estimation. 1.5 is also financially absolutely doable, because our debt level will reach then overall about 100%, which is possible, and we can then carry it, and we will grow much more because we have of course 67 million more Europeans in the internal market, and the 6 Western Balkan countries, Ukraine, Georgia and Moldova. It will be a very good economic union in that area. We will also have in the euro. That's also very good, a stable, firm fundament. And obviously we will have some positive effect of this package in the reconstruction of Eastern Europe. We will also need to open our products markets to Mercosur and TTIP and the other 10 agreements which we were not doing for the last 25 years of French protectionism in Brussels. and it has to come to an end. Obviously, we need also to, at the same time, when we add 1.5 trillion to the economy with this debt package, we need also deflationary measures. And that's, of course, the opening of the labor market towards Ukraine fully, the inclusion of the Western Balkans in the labor markets fully. That's, of course, the opening of the trade system towards Mercosur, Africa, ASEAN, Indian, and also TTIP. That's all the left and the nationalists, all these crazy people, they have blocked us and kept us down. They hate this agenda. They want European debt, but only to extend the social system. Yeah, that's of course wrong. We need to have, and it's much more social to include the Ukrainians and the Western Balkan Europeans. Yeah, and not to waste it in the internal redistribution struggle, but allow them to work as well and to compete and to perform on the joint European labor market, and also to overcome our our tragic quadruple sins of anti-Americanism, protectionism, xenophobia, and anti-Semitism. That is basically the tragedy of Europe, and we have to overcome that now and to be more open to the world, to include all the countries to make who are in goodwill. Of course, not what the leftists and the nationalists want is always to trade with Iran, Venezuela. No. To trade with Mercosur, it's peaceful people. It's Brazil, Argentina. To trade with America, it's our protector nation. It's our lead nation in NATO. They have saved Ukraine now. So that's very important. And that's also deflationary. Because what we have done now in the last years is much more protectionist tendencies, and then we have added more money in a protected market, and that's of course logically reactionary. So inflationary. And also what we've done is to be too much dependent on Russian energy. And now the Russians are blackmailing us with this energy weapon and the lack of agricultural goods, while we are not able to conclude a free trade agreement with the African Union, with the Gulf Cooperation Council, and with also our friends from Australia, where there's a lot of uranium and coal available. And other stuff as well, of course, agriculture. And we don't want that for various reasons, because we hate genetics, or we hate free trade, or we hate the whatever Bolsonaro and all these things. Yeah, and then we hate and we claim that we are the only one who want to protect the Amazonas, and we don't read the contracts, because in all these free trade agreements now, it's called partnership agreements. They have also sections about labor rights, and they have also sections about environmental standards, and it's all totally possible. And by the way, the people actually live quite fine in Australia, and we don't have to educate them too much about everything, because it's not that the Europeans have the only way to live. That's a bit wrong. Australia is also kind of fine, and America, okay, you cannot be happy with everything they do, and they are not happy with everything we do, but they live quite fine. So guys, let's get going, and we need such a package, 1.5 trillion. And I think it's quite logical. We need to have it at the summit of EU enlargement, where the decisions are made. Yeah, and now in May, at the 30th of May, and then on the 23rd of June, and there's a week of big summits at the end of June. And that's of course the summit for G7, for the EU, and for NATO. And then we need to make the decisions of enlargement, but also payment, and also then deflationary measures by more common debt, and by more openness, and by more inclusiveness, and by more enlarged European Union. That's quite logical, and by a pan-European labor market, and by reasonable economics. And by the way, cut taxes. That would be also very good, because if we will be more competitive, we will grow much faster, and we will outperform Russia economically, and that is the most important. Yeah, we have won the Cold War also by economic means, and this is one pillar of winning it. It's the enlarged European Union. So for our Eastern European issues, by including them in the European Union, make peace and also pay for peace. And then we will be much more successful than Russia, and we will outperform Russia, and the long war will be won. It will be a long war, it will be a decade long. Putin will not simply disappear, or there will be no coup d'etat against him, as nice as that would be, but it's not going to happen. Most likely. We will have to economically outperform Russia, and for this we need to include Ukraine, we need to pay for it together, we need also to be more open for Mercosur, TTIP, etc., and we need also to be a more competitive internal market, and we need to cut ourselves off of the Russian market to deprive them of their main revenue bringer, that is our energy consumers. And by doing so, we will be much cleaner, much greener, much richer, actually. Interestingly enough, we will get away from this Russian carbon growth model, but we will be a much more competitive economy by doing so. And our consumers and our workers will be much more secure, much more richer, and also the Eastern Europeans will be much richer, much more secure, much freer, and that is what we should do. That's a fair and that's a open and that's a serious European Union as a very serious global actor. And please, French, give the Security Council to the Europeans. And let's be a real European Union of 37 countries, united, strong and powerful and rich by common European debts, by more unity. And please have some courage, Mrs. Edstadler and everybody else. If you don't believe in Europe, let other guys do the job. Because your nationalism, xenophobic, protectionist kind of consensus and anti-Americanism has led us into this crisis. You are closing the EU from new countries. Your protectionism has led us into the crisis. Your anti-Americanism is so fundamentally wrong. Please join the European Union and now join NATO for in the case of Austria, but support Ukraine's EU membership and support Kosovo's EU membership. The Germans seem to have done that. It was yesterday in the news. So good. My little rant in the morning. Thanks a lot. Time for better economics. Bye.